In the middle of the Libyan desert, far from any city, road, or airfield, an oil survey team spotted something that should not have been there. A World War II bomber, sitting alone in the sand. It had not exploded. It had not burned. And from a distance, it almost looked as if the crew had simply landed, stepped outside, and walked away. But when searchers came closer, the mystery became much darker. The plane was still there. Supplies were still inside. Some equipment was still in place, but the men were gone. And for years, no one knew where they had gone, or how far they had walked before the desert took them. The aircraft was a B-24 Liberator, one of the heavy bombers used by the United States during the Second World War. Its name was painted on the side, Lady Be Good. For 15 years, it had been missing. No confirmed crash site, no rescue, no graves, no final radio message that explained everything. It had simply vanished during a mission in 1943. And then, in 1958, it appeared again. Not in the sea, not near an airfield, not where anyone had searched, but deep in the desert, hundreds of miles from where the crew was supposed to be. It was not just a wreck, it was a question made of metal. The men who flew Lady Be Good were young. Most were new to combat. They had trained for war, but training is one thing. Flying into darkness over enemy territory in a heavy bomber full of fuel and explosives is another. They were part of the American air campaign in North Africa, operating from Libya after Axis forces had been pushed back. Their job was dangerous but clear: fly across the Mediterranean, strike targets in Italy, and return to base. On paper, it was a mission. In reality, it was night, distance, weather, navigation, fuel, fear, and one mistake waiting patiently in the dark. On April 4th, 1943, Lady Be Good took off from its base in Libya. The target was Naples, Italy. The bomber was late getting into the air, and from the beginning, the mission was not going smoothly. In wartime aviation, small delays could grow teeth. A few minutes here, a little confusion there, a change in visibility, a missed formation, and suddenly the sky becomes a very large place to be lost. Lady Be Good flew north across the Mediterranean toward Italy. Below them was dark water. Ahead of them was enemy territory. Behind them was the desert. And somewhere in that darkness, their path home was already beginning to disappear. By the time the bomber reached the area of the target, conditions had changed. Clouds, darkness, and confusion made the mission difficult. The crew could not complete the attack as planned. Like many bomber crews in bad conditions, they had to make decisions quickly, with limited information and almost no margin for error. Eventually, Lady Be Good turned back toward North Africa. That should have been the safer part of the flight. The mission was over. The bombs were no longer the main danger. The crew only had to find their way home. But sometimes the most dangerous part of a flight begins after the target is already behind you. Because now the crew was tired. It was night. Fuel was burning. And navigation over empty sea and empty desert could become deadly. As Lady Be Good headed south, something went wrong. The crew believed they were flying back toward their base, but in the darkness, with navigation problems and poor visibility, they lost their position. The radio direction finder was not giving them the certainty they needed. The ground below offered almost no help. At night, the desert can look like the sea can look like the desert, and from thousands of feet above, both can look like nothing at all. They called for assistance. They were trying to find home, but the terrible truth was that Lady Be Good had already passed it. The bomber flew over or near its base without the crew realizing it, and continued south, deeper and deeper into the Sahara. Every minute carried them farther from rescue. Every mile turned a navigational error into a death sentence. This is what makes the story so chilling. The crew did not know they were flying into the desert. They likely believed they were still over the Mediterranean or near the coast, or close enough to safety that rescue would be possible. But below them was not water. It was sand, an endless black desert, silent and empty, stretching far beyond the reach of any quick search. The engines kept running. The fuel kept falling. The crew waited for a coast, a beacon, a runway, a sign. But nothing appeared, only darkness. And then came the moment every aircrew fears. The aircraft could not stay in the sky much longer. With fuel nearly gone, the order was given to abandon the aircraft. One by one, the men prepared to jump. Imagine that moment. A bomber shaking in the night, wind tearing past the open hatch. No clear idea where you are. No city lights below. No runway. No rescue party. Only blackness. They jumped into the dark, believing they had a chance. The aircraft, now empty, continued flying without them for a short time, like a ghost machine refusing to die. Then Lady Be Good came down in the desert, but it did not crash in the way rescuers expected. It did not explode into pieces. It landed hard, broke, and came to rest in the sand, damaged but still strangely intact. The crew, however, was no longer with it. They were scattered somewhere in the desert night. When Lady Be Good failed to return, search efforts began. But the searchers had a problem. They did not know where to look. The logical assumption was that the bomber had gone down in the Mediterranean or near the coast. That was where lost aircraft were expected to be. That was where rescue made sense. No one imagined that the bomber had flown far beyond its base and ended up deep inside the Libyan desert, so the search looked in the wrong direction. Days passed, then weeks. Then the war moved on. The crew of Lady Be Good was listed as missing. Families waited for news that never came. And the desert kept its secret. Then 15 years later, an oil exploration team flying over the Libyan desert saw something unusual on the sand below. At first, it was just a shape, but as they came closer, the shape became unmistakable. Wings, tail, fuselage, a bomber. When teams reached it, they found Lady Be Good resting in the desert, weathered by time but still recognizable. A warplane was supposed to end in wreckage, flame, impact, noise. This one ended in silence. The bomber had been found, but the crew had not. The discovery raised a terrible question. If the men had survived the jump, where had they gone? Searchers began to understand that the crew had probably landed alive. They had gathered after parachuting into the desert and tried to walk towards safety. But they did not know where they were. That was the cruelest part. If they had known the aircraft was not far away, they might have returned to it. But they walked into the desert instead. But in the dark, after parachuting separately, the crew may not have known where the bomber had come down. So they walked, not toward rescue, but into one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. The desert does not need to hurry. It does not chase. It does not shout. It simply waits. The men walked under the sun and through the cold desert nights, carrying what little they had. They rationed water. They tried to stay together. They believed, at least for a time, that the coast or help might be closer than it really was. But the distances were impossible. One by one, the men began to fall behind. There were no roads, no villages, no real shade, no clear direction, only sand, rock, heat, and the slow realization that every step might not be bringing them closer to life. They survived for days, long enough to hope, long enough to suffer, but not long enough to be found. Later searches found evidence of the crew's final journey. Human remains were discovered far from the aircraft. Personal items were found along the route. The story began to form piece by piece, not from one dramatic final moment, but from small traces left in the sand. It was the trail of exhausted men trying to live one more day. They had survived the fall. They had survived the first days, but the desert had been waiting. The story of Lady Be Good is not frightening because of an enemy fighter or a dramatic battle. There was no final dogfight, no heroic last stand, no explosion that ended everything in seconds. What makes it haunting is the quietness of it. A crew survived the war in the air, only to be defeated by distance, darkness, and a mistake no one understood in time. Their bomber was found almost like a message from the past, sitting alone in the desert, silent, recognizable, waiting. That is why the image of Lady Be Good remains so powerful. It looks abandoned, but it was not abandoned casually. It was left behind by men who were still trying to survive. In the end, Lady Be Good was not just a missing bomber. It was a reminder that in aviation, being close to home is not the same as being safe. A few degrees of error, a dark night, a broken sense of position, a desert mistaken for something else, and 9 men disappeared into history. The aircraft came back to the world 15 years later, but the crew never truly did. Their last flight did not end in the sky. It ended slowly, step by step, under the desert sun, after they had already vanished.